I have a direction going in. Okay. These things, I still need to do.
Okay.
This is what they do in Quakerland. You put your hand on it.
Gentlemen.
It doesn't work here.
Gentlemen. Thanks for coming tonight. Okay. Unfortunately, as you probably noticed by now, Justin's changed a little bit. Justin. Not sure where Lee is, but Justin's changed a little bit. So Justin's sends apologies. He's currently not here, unfortunately. He's enjoying himself in another land. So those who don't know me, my name's Lee. I'm secretary of the club, and especially for those on the stream. This evening we got a presentation night from Warren, VK0WN. Warren's been licensed since 2008, is that right? Thereabouts?
Got my foundation in 8, yep.
Foundation 8, and then went all speeding along to advance in 2015. Last year he went for a little bit of a trip down somewhere.
Trying to make it quiet, sorry.
It doesn't work.
It's a weird one. Then a little place called Antarctica, you might have heard of it. And this evening he's going to give us some stories of his time down there. I'll hand the floor to Warren.
Oh, well, thank you, Lee. Yeah, well, this is all a little bit spontaneous and ad hoc talking to you tonight, but yeah, I had said to Justin following my recent trip I would like to eventually put on a presentation with fancy pictures, slides, that sort of thing, but he asked whether I'd be happy just to sort of do a conversation style Q&A here tonight, so yeah, here we are. So some of you will know at very short notice an opportunity was pointed out to me to go to Antarctica, and I checked the Antarctic Division's website, and sure enough 2 techs were wanted for Casey Station for the upcoming winter, which was well, the job applications for that year had already closed, so for whatever reason 2 roles needed to be filled at a very late stage, and in the last minute then I thought, oh well, I'll give it a go, and uploaded my resume sort of one minute before midnight, and very next day got the phone call from the Antarctic Division. Can you come in tomorrow for an interview? Yeah, so this all happened just over a year ago, and then there was a rush on. The interview was a technical interview, how things would go with radio, IT, satellite equipment, and so on. And pretty much I said to, they were happy with that. Then there was a rush with medicals and a site test and all sorts of paperwork and police clearance, all these sort of things. And I still wasn't offered the job when, officially anyways, when I even went into quarantine, because back then in those days you had to do your 2 weeks of hotel isolation before going down, and then following that you would be sort of tunneled through what they called a sterile tunnel to via a bus to your aircraft, and off you went. Yeah, so this happened then in February. Now this was, even though I have been to Antarctica before, but we're talking the 90s here, and it was all ship traffic then, voyages, and I knew that Casey had these flights, but thought, well, My days are over now. I'll never experience that. And here I was at 4 a.m. in the morning boarding the 319 to take me to Casey. Had already been delayed by almost a day due to weather conditions down south. But then the one window opportunity opened up, and off we went. So yeah, you arrive at Hobart Airport by the bus, takes you around the back via the gates to the tarmac, and you board the aircraft, and it takes off. And 4 hours later, 4.5 hours later, you're coming down and you land in this all white area. So it was heading towards the end of summer by the time I arrived at Casey. So half the crew, they had over 100 people over summer, had already left, and another big lot was leaving on the next plane after mine. So it wasn't long until we shrunk right down to our minimum wintering crew, which turned out to be 30 people, and the winter started. So the whole employment was for a short winter, so to speak. So that was going in at the end of summer and coming out on the earlier part of the next summer, and so that was normally going to be 8.5 months. Did extend out to 9 months. But yes, had a good winter down there. Then the new summer started arriving, and I thought, wow, this place is really changing now. It's not not my quiet little home with my little family anymore. And I just felt ready to go home then. So so I came back then in November, end of November. Yes, that's right. And so since then, yeah, I guess just getting used to normal life back here. Traffic on the roads, paying for goods when you grab them in the supermarket. Paying for meals, all these sort of things. Yeah, so I guess that's a rough timeline overview. I think, well, I felt pretty lucky to have been able to do the stint. I was the second oldest on station. One chap 2 years older than me, a med observer, Barry, he and I kind of, with a few others, had the, I guess, like the seniors club going down there. And for the most part, I would say the expeditioners were probably in their 30s, some were in their 20s, some were in their 40s, but maybe 30 was a good average. And my earlier life, or trips down to Antarctica, I was about that age, and so it was kind of a new experience. Rather than seeing all my fellow expeditioners as my sort of immediate peers, they were more like, I don't know, they were more like kids to me, and that was kind of nice in its own way. But yeah, no, I had a great time down there. So I think, again, very lucky to have done that. And coming back, yeah, I think I did shed a tear as I was in the travel bus that takes us from Casey Station up the hill to the aerodrome, and I could see the buildings of Casey disappearing on the horizon. And then the RAAF Globemaster came in, the humongous C-17. It landed and did its 3-point turn on the ice runway, unassisted, and we boarded and took off basically. So there you go. That's the end of my story. Yeah, so...
So a 3-point turn, is that just literally full noise reverse thrust to...
Yes, that's right. So the I take it probably, yeah, there are no what do you call these vehicles that sort of tow the aircraft around, and the aircraft just using its reverse thrust actually can just do a 3-point turn on the runway, provided the runway is wide enough, and that's something you don't normally get to see. I guess the slight delay in coming back home was due to the fact that over winter we had much higher than typical snow accumulation, not only down near the coast at Casey, but inland as well. So there was much more work to do to clear the runway, plus some mechanical failure with the plant equipment that's used for grooming the runway. And that became critical to the point that we had to get spares flown in and airdropped, which allowed us then to repair the C-17, sorry, not the C-17, but the plant equipment used at the runway.
So you posted a fair bit of stuff on Facebook when you were down there. This parachute drop was one of the things you posted a picture of, wasn't it?
Yes.
So that was spare parts for the machine to clear the runway.
Yes, that's right. So in fact, when the C-17 comes and does do airdrops, it's usually like a dozen pallets or so that are shoved out the back of the plane. So it's almost like a major resupply. But airdropped, where on this case time was essence, and it was really just the spare parts and some mail and a little bit of fresh food, which we hadn't had all winter. So and that had to happen fairly quickly. So yeah, the main vehicle, which needed part of the gear system replaced, was brought down to Casey Station in advance. The airdrop took place, and then basically overnight the mechanics worked to get that machine running again, and the next day it was towed up to the airfield. There are two airfields at Casey. There's a small one nearby, known as the skiway. That's for smaller aircraft equipped with skis, and that's more readily available. Doesn't take too much work to get it going. The aerodrome with the ice runway is about 70 kilometers inland, and for the 319 that flies from Hobart, it does require about 3.5 kilometers of runway. And when we realized that this was going to take a long time to get the runway ready, we looked at doing just only half the runway, which is all the C-17 needs to land and to take off. Even though it's a heavier machine, it has much stronger engines as well, and I think larger wings, so it can actually take off on a much shorter runway. So the decision was made to not worry about the 319, but just get the runway ready, 2 kilometers of it for the C-17, and the C-17 from the RAAF was available then for 2 time periods before Christmas, of about 10 days each, and so the division basically booked it continuously, and once it started coming in, yeah, it did about a flight from Hobart down to Casey every second day during these windows. So yeah, the airdrop, of course, didn't require any runway, and I guess that provided some interesting experience for me, as normally over summer we have comms operators on station who deal with all the radio traffic, and they're very skilled in communicating with the aircraft, providing weather updates and things like that. So before my first summer, or the summer where I arrived, had finished, one of the senior comms operators there took me through what we would have to do with aircraft communications, particularly because she and the other comms operators would be on board that aircraft. So they would have to be up at the aerodrome in time, and so be having no dedicated comms operators there, it would be left to the radio techs to fill in that position. And yeah, it was pretty much okay. I think the comms operators, they said, "Oh, look, these days, especially with the Globemaster, you don't have to worry so much. They have their own little email printing terminal in the cockpit and receive all the essential information that way." Not the 319, so yeah, that's where we would have a bit more comms to do. And the options were shortwave radio using HF or by sat phone. And it seems that yeah, sat phone has become reasonably popular, and well, I was still keen to give HF radio a go. So when the 319 was on its way at the end of summer to take the last ones out, I think about halfway between Australia and Antarctica, I just put out a test call on frequency 5400. That's 5.4 megs. Just announcing that this was Casey Station, testing transmission and standing by. And lo and behold, yeah, they came back saying, yeah, this is, I forget what their call sign is now, Airbird, I think it is, Airbird. And so I guess that from that point on, then they basically told me what they wanted to know, which pretty much is, I guess, the most updated info from Wilkes Aerodrome, what the weather is doing, the air pressure. They talk about the QNH, so that helps them with adjusting the altimeter readings, and I guess wind speed and direction, that sort of thing. The other thing they want to know too is the friction of the ice runway. So that's part of a report that's provided by the runway people, which includes the condition, the length of the runway, and there are means of testing the friction of the surface, and that can vary over the length of the runway. And but all they want to know is the average friction over the whole length of the runway. Pretty much the same for the C-17 when it then came in to land for the first time after winter. The airdrop, yeah, we didn't have to worry about any of the information for landing the aircraft. I guess they just wanted to know whether the drop zone had been set up, and so the drop zone that was prepared was closer to the station, near the skiway, and it's sort of marked out like a giant square, not visible as such, but the coordinates are provided, and in one corner we spread out large blue tarps, and they're visible from the aircraft. So when the pilots come in and they can see the blue tarp, then it means it's all go. If anything is wrong at the drop zone, they can't accept the load to come down for whatever reason, then the tarps are quickly removed or rolled up, which signals no drop to take place. But no, that all went okay. The two pallets were pushed out very quickly together or behind each other, and one of the ropes from the second parachute somehow did manage to entangle itself a little bit with the first payload. So it didn't affect their descent. They came down, but what happened was that when the payloads come down and land on the ground, there's a release that allows the parachute then to deflate and flatten down. And this release didn't work. So once they were on the ground, we had one of the pallets taking off on the ice sheet, and the pilots actually could see that from the air. So while this thing was moving, one of our tractor drivers saw the situation, and although I think the tractors with their heavy weight and the way they're fitted out are really restricted to 20 kilometers per hour, he did push it up a bit over that in order to get in line, if you like, ahead of the parachute, and managed to get in front and catch the parachute, and so all was good. Yeah. So the pilots were on their way home. They were already probably a few hundred k's away from Casey. They wanted to know how we went with that parachute. They called up on HF, and I said, well, stand by and I'll find out. And I was talking to the drop zone people via VHF, and that's a Marine Channel 10 we used, which the aircraft actually also use when they're in the Antarctic areas. So the drop zone people gave me the lowdown of how they managed to get everything under control. And when I got back to the C-17, they said, "Oh yeah, we were able to follow it on Channel 10." So yeah, it just goes to show you when you're airborne, the VHF does carry a fair distance. So yeah, that was that was our delivery of the spare parts. Then that was the end of the flying for that, well, for winter anyways, until we had the Wilkes runway sort of going again. Typically in the past, the runway people would come in earlier than the rest of the summers via McMurdo Station, and it's a team of maybe some 10 people or so that are sort of specialized and look after the aerodrome. This year, and I think this probably is a new standard, they keep a minimum crew over winter at Casey Station, and they can start preparing the aerodrome well in advance before the summer season starts. So we have these people who I guess are the specialists in that field, and they can draw on help from other Casey expeditioners if they need the extra manpower. And so the rest of the aerodrome team would then come in on the first flight with Airbird. But with Airbird not coming in and the runway not ready for a while, these people were brought in by Christchurch and McMurdo, and then a smallish Basler aircraft, which is a Douglas DC-3 converted with some newer engines and the like. Yeah. So, hello, Kim.
Hello, what's your name?
Exactly. Yeah. So with the ski runway then we decided we'd have one radio tech at the ski runway to be on site for the comms equipment when the Basler comes in from McMurdo, and the other one would be at station in the communications operations room. So my offsider Nelson, we decided I'd go up to the airfield and he'll do the comms on the radio, and yeah, it was good to be up there at the airfield and see the plane come in. And yeah, as far as comms go, it was a mixture of channel 10. Initially using airband though, so we're talking frequencies around 120 megs, something in that order. I forget now the exact frequency that we typically use there, but I guess the VHF channel 10 with the frequency modulation is actually a lot clearer and easier to understand than the airband, which is AM, amplitude modulation. But AM is still common with airband, with air traffic, and has the advantage that if you do have double ups where two might be talking on top of each other, you can probably still decipher each of them, who they were and what they were saying. Whereas with FM, VHF, one might just override the other one. So that's yeah. To use airband, that was one of the qualifications I had to gain as well. It's called an AROC, Air Aviation Radio Operator Certificate. It's pretty much an online course these days, and it really is for novice people. So it's the alphabet, it's I guess the lingo, the pro words, also what they call verbatim, so you repeat everything that you communicate is repeated back by the other party, just to double check that everything has been understood correctly. And so all the staff, all the workers up at the airfield, they would have done that AROC course as well. And yeah. Other communications with aircraft, once things got going towards the end of my stay for the second summer, so to speak, we had a second Basler come in. So the first one was allocated to the American usage anyways, for basically based at McMurdo Station. The second one was really our own, the Casey one, but as it would be down there if logistics require nations help each other out and say, well, look, if you can do a flight for us, we'll return that. When we can provide a flight to you as our aircraft. We did a flight then with the Basler to Davis Station to collect some early RTA people. So these were expeditioners that needed to get home early following their winter. So we were bringing them over to Casey so that they could then fly from Casey to Hobart. And by that stage then the first lot of summers had arrived, just a small crew, but that included our operations coordinator. So during summer, when a lot of activity takes place at Casey Station, you have numerous field parties out and about, other activities happening, and so allocation of people, teams, vehicles, all these things need to be planned and coordinated. So there's a dedicated person for that, and they were there to assisting, I guess, with the aircraft movements and things like that as well. We had the comms operator for Casey actually did not come in on the first flight, if I recall, and so that just meant that Nelson and myself had a few extra flights to deal with. So I guess by the time we left, we felt much more comfortable working with the pilots and providing them with the METARs and species and other weather information and runway reports and stuff like that that they like to have before they get within the area. And yeah, my flight home, like I said, that was also on the C-17, so that was quite interesting. You board the aircraft. It's a large cargo aircraft. I mean, you can roll the trucks in and out from the back. And we had a little bit of cargo which was prepared down at Casey Station. It's all tied down onto specialized pallets that can then be lifted into the aircraft, and then they slide along these tracks, and everything is netted down and locked into position. So on a full aircraft, yeah, the center of the aircraft just has all these pallets lined up, and as a passenger you sit along the outside wall, so sideways like that. My flight, we only had about 2.5 pallets, so to speak, so it was fairly open and spacious, and as soon as the aircraft is airborne and reaches a reasonable height, the signal that you can take your seat belts off comes through, and everybody can just get up and wander around throughout the whole flight. And I was hoping...
Are there any windows in the back?
There are a few tiny windows, little porthole ones, where there's the odd door. That's pretty much it. So you look through a little round one like that. So yeah, you can get a glimpse of outside. But otherwise, yeah, it's just you're inside. There's no cladding or paneling. You just see everything, like just a gazillion of pipes and cables and air conditioning ducts. It's just all the infrastructure there is exposed.
So
Quite
what's the
fascinating.
temperature like in there?
Sorry?
The temperature, is it?
Yeah, I thought
climate
it would be
control?
cold. It's cold when you board and get settled in, but that's only because it's been opened up. But yeah, once you get going, the heating is just like in any other aircraft, and it pushes through the heated air through. So yeah, you can start stripping off and feel quite comfortable.
How long's the flight back to Hobart?
Yeah, about the same, so around 4.5 hours. And I had prepared myself by downloading a few movies onto my phone, and I did take earmuffs with me that I could plug into my phone, so I could cut out sort of any ambient noise. What did I watch? Hidden Figures, I think it was called, the ladies at NASA. I had hoped that I could visit the cockpit, and just waiting for the right opportunity to ask. So back at Casey Station, I stumbled across a shoebox that was full of stickers, and they sort of these stickers were sort of highlighted the Wilkes aerodrome with the C-17 flying past and so on. And I thought, oh, I might have to snaffle a couple of these. And once we were airborne, and I wanted to ask one of the, they didn't have cabin crew as such, but they did have workers and other sort of military personnel that were sort of looking after the cargo and the people and things like that. And as one of the guys came by, I sort of said, would there be any chance of visiting the cockpit? Oh, I'll have to go ask the captain about that. And I said, yeah, that'll be great, thanks. And I handed him one of these stickers. And he looked at it and says, not a problem.
She's cheap days.
So yeah, pretty soon I got up to the cockpit and had a good chat. There were 4 pilots up there. 2 were flying the aircraft. The other 2 were probably the ones that had flown the aircraft down to Casey. But yeah, because of rest requirements and so on, they have to have the extra teams. And so I had a bit of a chat with the co-pilot. A lady, and she said, so you're the voice behind VNJ Casey. Nice to put a face to a call sign.
Yes, nice.
So yeah, so that was good. But then in the end, once everything was settled, they were open for anybody to come up to the cockpit anyways and visit.
Oh, right.
So yeah, there was plenty of time, so people just go up there one at a time and have a good look around. Yeah.
How many amateur contacts did you make?
Well, tell us about your amateur radio activities.
Yeah, so well, I got down there, and the commercial radio equipment that's installed down there is not really sort of, let's say, amateur radio friendly. It's got pre-programmed frequencies in it. And there's a bit of a rigmarole to reprogram these things, so it's probably best to leave it untouched unless you really know what you're doing. I took my own ham radio down with me, and once I had sort of worked out life at Casey Station, got settled in a bit, then I started building my my inverted V antenna, finding a building where I could run the cable into and set up the radio, and then just had to find out when sort of the propagation was good to get out to the open wide world. So yeah, I pretty much locked myself into the 20-meter band, just simply because of the wire antenna, and I was aware of a hut called a hobby hut, because funny enough, only days or weeks before I guess I became aware of possibly going down to Casey, we actually had a wintering Sparky who had returned from Casey come and visit us here at Reast, and he showed us his setup, which was in the so-called hobby hut. And the hobby hut is it's like a woodworking workshop, but not for the tradies, but for people to use as for recreational purposes. So, anyways, yeah, I got myself set up, and quickly discovered that there was a fair bit of local noise, QRM, around the place. There's not too much you can really do about that. But yeah, it was much worse on 40 meters, so that really discouraged me to even try and go for 40 meters. But on weekends, sometimes the noise was a bit lower, and if the propagation was right, yeah, you could really get out with a very simple antenna and 100 watts that the 7300 puts out. So typically I try to get on air during my lunch break, because that seemed to be a good time of the day. And then later on, the second half of winter was the later part of the day became quite good. So again, fairly convenient after work or on weekends. And but on a whole, I was a bit disappointed how much I could hear. So it really was dependent on good propagation periods. So in all, I made just over 600 contacts while I was down there. Half of them were to Australia, to VK, and the other half to about 40 other countries. So yeah, often at dinner time I'd walk into the mess and people would ask, you know, get any good contacts in? And I'd say, oh yes, got one to Alaska and one to China or something like that. And yeah, they were always quite keen to hear how I was going. And occasionally they'd come and hang out with me in a hobby hut and just listen in as I try and get the QSOs in. Yep.
I've got a question. What was your obviously every day is going to be different for you, but what would a typical day look like when you're actually working down in terms of your work duties?
Yeah, so a stock standard day. I'd get up around 6 in the morning, and I wouldn't bother actually with breakfast so much, but I just needed my monster coffee. So I'd do my zombie walk down into the mess, had my big mug with me, put in 3 double shots in that, good spoon of sugar, and half of it was milk. And I guess one of the duties I took on, which is also typically done by the comms people, is printing out the daily newspapers. So we get emails with prepared newspapers, if you like, in PDF format. They're very brief. They're actually designed for ships, so they're very efficient, as in file size. And so I'd log in, find these, print them out, and put them out on the tables in the mess. And then after that, actually, I'd go back to my room, have a quick shower, and then head off to work at about 7:30. 7:30, we sort of worked out our weekly routine. Every station can do it differently. Some people like to start earlier, some later, some like to have a shorter lunch or longer lunch, but we had an all-station, I guess, meet where we sort of decided, let's just all start at 7:30, lunch will always be from 1 till 2, and knock-off will be at 4:30. So those were the standard working hours. And then typically after knock-off, then, oh well, depending what you were doing, a lot of people might stay on a little bit longer until dinner time, or otherwise you might just go into the recreation areas, like the bar or whatever, have a refreshment before dinner. Dinner was at 6. Over summer it would be stretched out from 6 to 7, but in winter we just confined it from 6 to 6:30. The dinner was always great. There was always a good variety of food put out, never any shortage. The chef we had, he was good. It was always tasty stuff, and I must say I had to work very hard to sort of not just keep eating and eating. So
Free gym membership.
yeah, I guess with a lot of tradies about, of course, your smoker is very important. So at 10 o'clock we had our morning tea, and really that's when I think when I and a number of other people would decide, this will be my first meal or my breakfast time sort of thing. So get a good load then. And like for me, lunch wasn't all that important. I could easily then hang out as a wait till dinner time. And so that was good. I would just go straight into the hobby hut then and maximize my time there. Yeah, and come 6:30 when dinner was pretty much coming to an end, at least half the crew, if not more, would then converge into the kitchen area and just voluntarily start cleaning up the whole place. So the kitchen was always in immaculate condition, and the chef was also very happy for us to use the kitchen too, once we had sort of a bit of a safety induction, if you like. People could go there any time of the day and night, and well, probably not so much during the day while he was working there, but at night when if you felt like preparing yourself a meal or so, you could go for it. Yeah. Saturdays then was a little bit different, a little bit of a sleep-in, then station duties, so that's domestic cleaning. There was a rostered system, everybody would have jobs to do, vacuuming the corridors or cleaning the lounge areas, doing the gash run, which meant driving around to all the buildings, collecting the different bins of waste and taking those to the appropriate places. So that would be actually, with the 30 of us and the minimal amount of cleaning we need to do, it was over and done within about half an hour, something like that. So not really a big deal. And then Saturday afternoon and all day Sunday, it was really just recreation, relax, go out on field trips, those sort of things. So yeah, that's kind of the routine.
I just got a note from Reast Hobart, from Justin, who's just said great stuff, Warren. Love the parachute story. Thanks from Justin. 73.
Oh, right. Oh, good. Yeah. Anything else you'd like to hear about?
The work you actually did when you were working.
Yeah, so typically, I guess techs, especially new techs, when they get recruited by the division, they spend a fair bit of time at Kingston and at various agencies being trained up, if you like, for their work. Nelson and I, due to our sort of last minute recruitment, we managed to get 1 day in at Kingston, and the tech there who was on leave kindly came in despite his leave to give us an essential rundown on the satellite equipment. So if anything failed, the last thing we wanted to fail was the satellite, because that would keep us in contact with the outside world and we could probably get help. So we had a crash course on how to do tests and measurements and a bit of fault finding with the satellite equipment. Once we got down there, we had the luck that the tech who had been there over winter, the previous winter, stayed on a bit longer, so we had an overlap of 3 weeks with him, and he could show us around and give us a good idea of what the jobs were. So typically over summer you would have I guess more sort of the installation and I guess the installing of infrastructure and stuff like that, project work and so on, whereas in winter a lot of it was maintenance. So you would go around to wherever there were UPSs, you'd do battery checks, swap batteries, clean the equipment. We had special vacuum cleaners that were anti-static for cleaning IT equipment. And it's not just UPSs, there were cabinets and servers and all that sort of stuff. So there's a lot of routine stuff to do. Also the radios go through checks, so you measure their sensitivity, the frequency accuracy, the modulation, things like that. I guess some installation work we did do for the Ice Core Traverse team that you might have heard about. They had about half a dozen of these large Caterpillar tractors that needed VHF radios installed in them. And there were some funny issues with these Caterpillars in that their engine control unit, which was located in the ceiling of the driver's cab, seemed to be sensitive to radio interference and vice versa. So and the top is a fiberglass roof as well, so not good shielding or grounding available there. And some weird things happened. With one tractor, if the radio was used, it would just shut the engine down. Another one, as long as they had light bars on top, as long as the light bar was on, the radio would work okay. If you turned the light bar off, yeah, the radio just went funny. Yeah, there was there were strange issues going on, and really you just had to take one at a time and try and sort of put in chokes and earthing leads and relocate the antenna and just try and minimize the interaction between the vehicle electronics and the radios. Yeah, the other typical work, well, the satellite building kept us busy. That's a gigantic golf ball that has a 7-meter dish inside, and it's now getting to about 40 years of age. And when we had the strong blizzards, it only takes the finest of crack somewhere within the material or between the frames, and the interior of the building would fill up then with a powdery sort of mountain of drift snow, if you like. So had to keep an eye on that. Yeah, we didn't have any major failures. On ANZAC Day we did lose communications, and we couldn't figure out where the problem was. So we started at the satellite building, because that's where we were missing the broadband connection. That's all we knew. The weather was horrendous outside, so it was a bit of an effort to get from one building to the next and then back. in the end, the station leader just said, "Look, guys, you've spent nearly all day trying to figure this out, and we're actually having our sort of long weekend. I'll just put out some sat phones for expeditioners who want to call home, and come Monday or Tuesday, then we'll see if we can sort the satellite problems out." So the station leader was good like that, and as it turned out, in the end, it was a modem fault in Perth. So there was nothing we could have done anyways. It wasn't at our side of the equipment. But the hassle we had was, because it was a long weekend, we couldn't easily get in touch with the help desk at Kingston and the select people for this particular issue, and the same with the satellite company. I forget their Speedcast. Yeah, I think the head office, or the Australian head office, is in Adelaide, and it was, yeah, we had problems getting onto their technical support as well, and so that became a bit of a discussion later on, and I think there were some higher level, I guess, meetings between the division and Speedcast to sort of try and avoid this kind of scenario happening again. The otherwise typical things, resetting passwords. Expeditioners would, as government security would have it, you have to renew or reset your password every 3 months, and then if you manage to stuff that up, then you can't do anything at all anymore. The computers are such that you can log into the system from any workstation if you like, but if you don't actually sign out properly, but only just lock your login, so to speak, then there can be problems if you start to try and reset your password from elsewhere and things like that. So those were typical issues. Yeah, the I guess the radios, really just the maintenance of them. In the past, a lot of repairs would take place, especially with the handheld radios when they get dropped or so, or just age or run over or so. Then you might have to replace the knobs or the screen or something like that. And there are plenty of spare parts, or you just take a number of dead radios and use those for spare parts. We didn't really bother with sort of that type of repair, as these radios will soon be replaced anyways. We had a good quantity of them, and unless it was a straightforward repair that wouldn't take up much time, yeah, we would just leave it and RTA the radios and back to Australia. There's also, I guess, inspecting all the areas that involve communications. That's also the huts that have radios, the transmitter, we used to have separate transmitter and receiver areas for the comms, particularly HF comms, but these days those two separate areas are actually both transceiver sites. Yeah, sweeping the antennas, making sure they're still in tune, those sort of things. Also, I guess keeping an eye on stock, doing the annual inventory, looking what you're low on equipment and materials, and get the orders in nice and early so that Kingston have time to purchase the stuff and get it into the cargo system. So yeah, that's pretty much what the techs do down there these days.
So, would you do this again, given the opportunity?
Look, I think I would. I would. Yes, I would.
Nice one.
I have to say, particularly if I knew that another season would be as good as the one that I had. We were very lucky with our wintering group. We all gelled well, and it was a happy winter, and I think that makes a big difference.
Was your experience average, an exception to the rule?
I'd say, well, I would say it was an exception in that it just was a really good winter.
Sure.
I think it's typical for
Tough
winters.
question, sorry, that means you're casting, light
Yeah.
on other excursions.
You can have disaster winters too. But I would say it's not uncommon for for a wintering party to sort of I guess get halfway through winter and then you have your sort of little groups and things like that, or you might just get more and more sensitive to the characteristics of other people and things like that. But I think we had. I think what helped Casey this winter too is that we had a fairly large team there. It was the 30 people. There was a good crowd, so you didn't sort of feel too confined, like as if you're spending a winter with only a dozen people or so, which was like the case back in Mawson days or so. I think also the division has probably become better at selecting people who are suitable to go down there. You can never get that always right, but certainly I guess in the sort of psychological assessment and a lot of the pre-departure sort of briefings and things like that, there was a lot of emphasis on I guess not only being sort of your social welfare, having that right, but also just awareness, personal awareness for other people and things like that. So yeah, so that made this winter very enjoyable. I would certainly love to enjoy another winter like that again. I have to say, even though I mean I was good or better on the radio side of things, they do need techs down there that are good with the IT equipment, those sort of things, and satellite experience helps as well. So I was lucky in that my offsider Nelson, who came from the ABC, had very suitable experience from with the IT equipment from the ABC. So between the two of us, we were able to sort of keep things covered. And I mean, comms is good too with Kingston if we needed to talk to people, because it was his first time down as a wintering tech as well. We occasionally would contact the techs at the other stations. Some of them had already done a number of years, so they were on top of things pretty well, and they were very happy to help you out. Even after hours, spend time on the phone, so to speak, and try and talk you through, I guess, fault finding processes and stuff like that. So yeah, but at the same time, I have to say, as good as the winter was, and as happy as I am to have done it, I do feel yeah, I do feel I've got that one ticked off. So I don't feel like I'll be missing out if I don't go again, put it like that.
Fair enough, bucket list accomplished.
How are we going there, Lee? Any more questions or something?
No questions. Does anyone have more questions for Warren?
A simple one, Warren. When you used the hobby hut, how did you get your antenna coax out without leaving the door partly ajar or something?
Yeah, well, there was very conveniently, there was about a foot-long piece of conduit penetrated through the wall. And I don't know who put that in, whether it might have been an earlier ham who was a bit hands-on and knew how to get through the wall. But it was also used for a VHF mounted radio that was inside and had the coax going out to a rooftop antenna. So I guess that was the first and foremost advantage of the hobby hut. There was a way of getting out. The other building I had looked at was the science building, particularly where the geophysics people used to have their equipment set up, and you had decent conduits leading outside that go off to the rheometer and earlier magnetometers and things like that. But yeah, I decided not to set up in that building as it was sort of being shut down partially for winter. I mean, you can't just completely shut down a building, but the temperature was lowered. The toilets were sort of closed off, just to sort of, I guess, minimize the, the required running of the building. And the hobby hut was also in a nice location too, sort of not far from the other buildings, so that when the weather was average, or if I just wanted to quickly duck out and have a listen, then it wasn't too much of a rigmarole to sort of get all dressed up and then start a longer march to one of the other buildings. So yeah, but very disappointingly, I didn't have at the ops building where the radio workshop is, there was not an easy way to get cables outside. So yeah, I did set up the radio temporarily down at the wharf. So Casey, it's almost a kilometer. Casey has a bit of a track to get down to the water's edge, and then along the water's edge there's a wharf area which is open to the sea, if you like, in summer. And for the workers down there, there's a dedicated 20-foot container which is well heated even in winter. And that was a nice spot. It was a bit quieter there radio-wise too, but I just didn't seem to get out as well. I just don't know whether I was too low.
You should have tried the VK0WN weight tenor.
And all these sort of things. Yes, exactly.
With an icebreaker.
The wharf hut, I did like it because by the time you marched your way down there, you felt you got off station a little bit. It wasn't quite out of the station boundary where you would have to get permission and stuff like that and take a survival pack with you. But you did have to sort of put on a notice board that you were there and how to be contacted. So it gave you that sense of sort of getting out of the station a little bit. And I think that was popular probably for other people too, who just sort of maybe just wanted to sort of get out of the city, if you like, and go somewhere a little bit off-site and have a bit of rec time elsewhere, hanging out, playing cards or something like that. And yeah, being a well-heated hut, it had a table, hot water jug, things like that there, so that was good.
Did you get over to Wilkes at all, Warren?
Yes, so Wilkes did 2 trips to Wilkes, and on the second one I thought I'm going to take the radio with me. And my inverted V antenna was made up of two long bamboo canes sort of taped together. So this thing was maybe 7 meters long or something like that. But I tied that down on the top of the Haglunds and took the radio with me over to Wilkes. So Wilkes is Wilkes was the very first station in the area. It was built around 1957 by the Americans for the International Geophysical Year, I think. And the Americans used it for about 2 years and then handed it over to the Australians, who then continued to use it for maybe around another 10 years or so. But I guess due to lack of experience, the location and the building style of Wilkes, it became apparent that it wouldn't last very long. And the first Casey station was then built during the 60s, and the day came then when the team just walked out of Wilkes and went into the first Casey station, which people referred to as a tunnel because of the way the buildings were connected with a tunnel-like corridor. But at Wilkes, there's still one building being maintained as for recreational purposes. It's not part of the very original Wilkes station. It was actually built by the Australians, the transmitter building, and it has something like 6 or 8 bunks in there. And unique, probably very unique to all of Australia, this hut actually has a wood heater in it. And in this wood heater you can also bake the best pizzas. So it's a tradition to go to Wilkes and have pizza out there. And some people do that as frequently as they can. Others get 1 or 2 trips in like myself and are happy with that. I took my radio out there and I just couldn't believe how quiet it was. I could hear the faintest signals. It was wonderful. And yes.
Where do you get wood from to do?
I was wondering that. Yeah.
You like bring a few pallets in?
Oh, yeah, you just chop down the trees and burn them. No, you'd be surprised how much leftover timber there is on station. So a lot of the packing crates and so on leave you with leftover timber. The building program, there might be offcuts. The stuff just seems to accumulate. So it's typically, even if people just do a quick day trip over to Wilkes without firing up the wood heater, it's quite common that you take a load of wood and restock the bin over at Wilkes. It's about 4 kilometers away. It's sort of around the other side of the bay. In winter, on the sea ice, you're able to walk straight across. Yeah, it's the atmosphere is very rustic inside. Do have to be a bit careful. The panels, the ceiling, and so on do have asbestos in them. So when the time comes that the building deteriorates too much, it'll probably go for good, because it just seems that it won't be you just won't be able to keep maintaining it forever, sort of thing. And it's showing signs of age and wear, that's for sure. So the sad day will come sometime in future where I think they'll just have to say goodbye to that station.
Warren, did you have any interaction with wildlife?
Well, when I got there at the end of summer, there were groups of adelies around going through their molting period, if you like, where they shed their feathers and replace them. So they lurk around even close to the station in wind-sheltered corners. Over winter, no wildlife whatsoever. And then come October, mid-October, the first thing you notice are the snow petrels and other birds flying around, and then you go out to the known colonies, penguin colonies or rookeries, and on the first day of arrival there'll be a few odd penguins. A day later there'll be a few hundred, and the next day there'll just be thousands of them. They just seem to all suddenly come in at once, and that's a real treat. Seals also come in. They seem to have particular spots where they give birth. So you have these like maternity wards and these young mother seals with their baby pups, and you can go and sort of eyeball them from a distance, and you can see how like almost on a daily basis the pups get bigger and bigger and bigger. And they're there for a few weeks. And as the ice disappears and the penguins are sort of jumping around in the water, the leopard seals turn up too, and you can see them chasing the penguins. So, but it is there's a lot of excitement around when wildlife turns up again. I suppose, especially for those who haven't seen Antarctic wildlife before, for me it was a little bit, I had seen a fair bit of this in my earlier trips back in the 90s, so it didn't kind of grab me that much, but nevertheless the excitement was there when the wildlife came back in, for sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anyone got any other questions?
More civil stuff. So, power generation, is that just diesel generators or
Yes.
such, and how do you get fuel for those?
Yeah, so it's all diesel. Special diesel though for the Antarctic conditions. We call it special Antarctic blend. It's refined in a way that it has, I think, the paraffin or other like waxes removed, so it doesn't get too greasy at sub-zero temperatures. Yeah, so we have a powerhouse with 4 main generators. They're about 160 kilowatts each, but we run typically only two at a time, and they're only loaded to about 60 to 70%. So that really does extend their life. Occasionally the 3rd generator would kick in, particularly if the chef would turn both ovens on in the oven in the kitchen. These were monster ovens, German-built things. Push of a little button, and you've just turned 20 kilowatts on.
Oh wow.
And so when both ovens were turned on, yeah, the 3rd generator would kick in for sure. The 4th generator was really just on standby, would get used if any of the other generators were sort of undergoing maintenance. So that's the main powerhouse. And then there's the emergency powerhouse, which has, I actually didn't go there. I think it's got 2 generators in it of the same size. And on a rare occasion we would switch the station over to the emergency powerhouse, I guess for testing or for other reasons. And it's not a simple exercise to change over to another powerhouse, as in you need to get the generators warmed up. They need to come up to speed. They need to be properly warmed before you put load on them, and then what actually takes quite a while is syncing them too. So it's quite interesting to watch that take place. You have quite an entourage of diesel mechanics, electricians, even plumbers congregating in the powerhouse, all working together to switch the load over to whatever powerhouse. So Yeah, other stations are similar. Mawson a bit smaller. I think they have one main generator as their emergency one. The stations do go through a fair bit of fuel. I think the information is there on the website, but yeah, you're talking easily, say for a year, maybe up to about 500,000 litres or so.
Keep going.
Uh,
Warren, you got 1,000 cubes delivered.
With Casey, that's gone up to about 700, but that's because it supports the aerodrome and all their equipment, plus the vehicles getting from the aerodrome to Casey Station. So the capacity on station to hold fuel, when you really max it out, so there's a lower fuel farm, the upper fuel farm, they're all connected, and then isolated tanks that are also connected, the satellite tanks. I think we can get about 1.1 to 1.2 million liters of fuel on station. And yeah, that's delivered by ship. So if there's one voyage that's absolutely essential, it's that one, to get the fuel in, particularly with Casey. And of course, maybe other heavy machinery and stuff like that. But otherwise, Casey is very well served with the aerodrome and the C-17, whereas the other stations do rely a lot more on the shipping for all of their cargo.
You mentioned watching a movie. Where did that movie come from? Did you have any internet connection, or they brought down?
Yeah, well, there have always been good collections down there. So it started off with film reels, then VHF tapes, and DVDs. These days we can download movies, and depending what access we have to movies back on the mainland, so to speak, we had a method of acquiring the latest or almost latest movies, and they would then get downloaded using a protocol that would only take up bandwidth that was unused, if you like. So these were transfers and typically carried out overnight or so, and then I mean, the movies aren't too big. I mean, you know, between 1 and 3 gigabytes or so. But yeah, you do have to sort of pick your time when to utilize the broadband, because the broadband is slow. It's about 9 megabits per second. So when everybody hops onto the internet, then yeah, you do notice it. It can slow down. Though having said that, one of the apps called WhatsApp is very popular down there and works very well. So when people wanted to communicate with their families back at home, I think similar to YouTube, WhatsApp can actually wind back the video resolution to sort of keep your conversation going without buffering. And the only time we really had difficulties was, say, major sporting events, AFL finals, Melbourne Cup, things like that, which you can't stream on, say, platforms like YouTube, so you're kind of locked into a high definition stream, and that can be annoying if too many other people want to use the internet at the same time, and then it just stops, and actually you're watching a footy game like a PowerPoint presentation, you know, frame, then a new frame, and I don't know how people put up with that.
Just keep looking at the numbers.
Yeah.
One more question? Let's go one more? No? All right. Thanks everyone for coming. Warren, thank you so much for being. It's been a wonderful evening. And yeah, good luck if you go back down there again. Thanks very much. Cheers.
Well, thank you, Lee. Yeah, so I do intend to come back here with a more picturesque presentation.